Imagine standing on the equator at noon, the sun blazing directly overhead. Now picture yourself at the edge of the Arctic Circle, where sunlight arrives at such a shallow angle that it barely schemes the frozen landscape. In these two environments, separated by thousands of miles, human beings have not just survived but thrived, with one striking adaptation visible to the naked eye: skin color. What if I told you that this variation in human pigmentation, far from being a simple cosmetic difference, represents one of the most elegant evolutionary compromises in the natural world? When Nina Jablonski accidentally spilled vitamin D solution on her laboratory bench in 1997 and watched it degrade under the ceiling lights, she could not have known she was about to help solve one of anthropology's greatest puzzles. This seemingly mundane accident would lead to a revolution in our understanding of human skin, an organ so nuanced in its design that it balances multiple competing biological demands simultaneously, all through the deceptively simple mechanism of pigmentation. The story of human skin begins not in a laboratory, but in Africa approximately 1.2 million years ago. Here, our early ancestors were undergoing a profound transformation, losing their protective body hair as they adapted to a new lifestyle of persistence hunting on the savanna. Professor Charles Thurgood of Oxford University explains, the shift to bipedalism and long-distance running created intense selection pressure for effective cooling. The human body evolved an extraordinary number of sweat glands, about 3 million of them, making us the sweatiest of all primates. But this evolutionary innovation came with a critical vulnerability. Without protective fur, our ancestors' skin was suddenly exposed to the intense ultraviolet radiation of the African sun. UV radiation damages DNA, causes mutations, breaks down essential nutrients like folate, and can lead to skin cancer. Our ancient relatives needed protection. The solution: melanin, a remarkable molecular complex produced by specialized cells called melanocytes. This pigment absorbs and dissipates up to 99.9% of UV radiation before it can penetrate to the deeper, more vulnerable skin layers. For early humans in equatorial regions, natural selection strongly favored darker skin with high melanin content. The evidence for this adaptation is written in our genes. The oldest variants of genes controlling dark skin pigmentation date back approximately 1.2 million years. But the human story did not end on the African savanna. Between 50,000 to 100,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans began their remarkable migration across the globe, ultimately inhabiting environments with dramatically different UV exposures, from the intense radiation near the equator to the minimal UV of northern latitudes. This created an evolutionary dilemma that would shape human appearance for millennia to come. While melanin effectively blocks harmful UV radiation, this same radiation serves an essential biological function. It catalyzes the production of vitamin D in the skin. Vitamin D regulates calcium absorption, immune function, and over 1,000 different genes. Without adequate vitamin D, humans develop rickets, osteoporosis, increased susceptibility to infection, and numerous other health problems. Dr. Patricia Nielsen of the Harvard Medical School puts it simply: human skin color represents an exquisite evolutionary compromise between two competing demands: protection from UV damage versus vitamin D production. The closer to the equator, the greater the need for protection. The further from the equator, the greater the need for vitamin D synthesis. But how exactly did this compromise manifest in human populations? And what unexpected advantages might different skin tones confer beyond this basic trade-off? The answers lie in a complex interplay of genetics, geography, and cultural adaptation that scientists are only now beginning to fully understand. When researchers at the University of Pennsylvania analyzed the genetic basis for skin color variation in 2017, they discovered something surprising. The genetic architecture of skin pigmentation was far more complex than previously thought. Rather than finding a handful of genes with large effects, they identified over 150 different genes that influence skin color, many with subtle, cumulative impacts. This complexity became even more apparent when geneticist Sarah Tishkoff led a groundbreaking study of diverse African populations. Her team discovered that some of the genetic variants associated with lighter skin in Europeans were also present in certain African populations, but these variants had evolved independently through convergent evolution. This finding shattered the simplistic notion that skin color followed a linear progression from dark to light as humans migrated northward. What we're seeing is that the evolution of skin color is not a simple story of moving north and getting lighter, Tishkoff explained in her 2017 paper. The genetics suggest multiple paths to similar phenotypes. But why would natural selection produce such complexity? The answer lies in the remarkable multifunctionality of human skin. Consider melanin itself. This pigment does far more than simply block UV radiation. Darker skin with higher melanin content provides superior barrier function, meaning enhanced protection against pathogens, reduced water loss in arid environments, and greater resistance to abrasion. These properties would have conferred significant advantages in certain ecological contexts, potentially explaining why some populations maintain darker skin even in regions with moderate UV exposure. Conversely, lighter skin offers advantages beyond vitamin D production. In regions with seasonal food scarcity, the ability to rapidly synthesize vitamin D during brief summer months could mean the difference between survival and developmental catastrophe. Archaeological evidence from northern Europe shows widespread vitamin D deficiency during the transition to agriculture, with skeletal remains exhibiting classic signs of rickets. These populations were under intense selection pressure for more efficient vitamin D synthesis, pressure that likely accelerated the evolution of lighter skin tones. But the story becomes even more intriguing when we consider the relationship between skin pigmentation and folate preservation. Folate, vitamin B9, is essential for DNA synthesis and repair, with particular importance during pregnancy and early development. UV radiation rapidly degrades folate in the bloodstream, potentially leading to neural tube defects and reproductive failure. Dr. Connie Swanson of the National Institutes of Health explains, the folate hypothesis suggests that darker skin evolved partly to protect this crucial nutrient. Women with higher melanin levels would maintain higher folate levels, reducing the risk of birth defects and miscarriage. This hypothesis helps explain a puzzling observation. Women across almost all human populations have slightly lighter skin than men of the same ancestry. Why? The answer may lie in the competing demands of folate preservation and vitamin D synthesis during pregnancy and lactation. Pregnant and nursing women require extraordinary amounts of both nutrients, a biological challenge that may have driven the evolution of sex differences in pigmentation as a partial solution. The complexity deepens when we examine how skin pigmentation interacts with climate beyond just UV exposure. In hot, humid environments like tropical rainforests, darker skin may provide enhanced antimicrobial properties, critical in regions where bacterial and fungal infections pose constant threats. Studies show that melanin binds to potentially harmful microorganisms, inhibiting their growth and preventing infection. Meanwhile, in cold, dry environments, lighter skin may help prevent water loss through transpiration, a subtle advantage in Arctic conditions where maintaining hydration could be challenging. This might partly explain why indigenous populations of the far north evolved some of the lightest skin tones on Earth, beyond just vitamin D requirements. But perhaps most surprising is how skin color adaptation intersects with diet and cultural practices. When researchers examined the genetic history of the Inuit people of Greenland, they found something unexpected. Despite living at extreme northern latitudes with minimal UV exposure, Inuit populations maintain somewhat darker skin than might be predicted by the vitamin D hypothesis alone. The explanation? The traditional Inuit diet is extraordinarily rich in vitamin D, containing fatty fish, seal, and whale blubber, all excellent dietary sources of this nutrient. This dietary adaptation reduced selection pressure for extremely light skin, demonstrating how cultural practices can interact with biology to shape human evolution. Similar patterns emerged elsewhere. Agricultural populations in northern Europe evolved lighter skin than hunting populations at similar latitudes in Asia, likely because the grain-based European diet provided less vitamin D than the meat-rich diets of northern Asian hunter-gatherers. Professor Peter Norman of the Max Planck Institute notes, what we're seeing is coevolution between genes, environment, and culture. Dietary adaptations, clothing practices, housing styles, all of these cultural elements interact with natural selection on skin pigmentation. This explains another puzzling observation. Skin pigmentation does not follow a simple gradient from equator to poles. Instead, we see a mosaic pattern of adaptation influenced by diet, elevation, cloud cover, cultural practices, and migration history. Consider the indigenous populations of the high Andes in South America. Despite living near the equator with theoretically high UV exposure, they have relatively light skin. The explanation lies in the combination of high elevation, where UV is indeed more intense, and traditional clothing practices that covered most of the body, reducing actual UV exposure to the skin. With less selection pressure for protective pigmentation, these populations maintained intermediate skin tones. Or examine the indigenous peoples of Southeast Asia and Oceania, who display a wide range of skin tones despite similar UV environments. Here, the interplay between coastal versus inland lifestyles, fishing-based versus agricultural diets, and varying cultural practices produced a diverse patchwork of adaptations. These examples reveal a profound truth about human skin color. It represents not a simple adaptation to UV, but a complex, multivariate response to numerous environmental and cultural factors. A response written in our genes through thousands of generations of natural selection. But the story does not end with these evolutionary adaptations. Modern research is uncovering unexpected ways that skin pigmentation continues to influence human health and physiology today, effects that go far beyond the traditional understanding of melanin as simply a UV shield. In 2010, Dr. Anthony Holloway at University College London made a startling discovery. When studying the relationship between skin color and wound healing, his team found that melanin-producing cells play a critical role in skin repair that extends well beyond UV protection. Melanocytes, the specialized cells that produce melanin, communicate with surrounding skin cells during wound healing through an intricate chemical language, helping coordinate the repair process. More remarkably, this communication varies in efficiency depending on baseline melanin production. Individuals with darker skin demonstrated different inflammatory responses to minor wounds, differences that could influence everything from scar formation to recovery time. This finding opened a new frontier in understanding how skin pigmentation affects everyday physiology. We've been focusing so much on UV protection that we missed the broader picture, Holloway explained. Melanocytes are actively involved in immune function, wound healing, and even neurological processes. They're not passive color providers, they're dynamic participants in the skin's function as an organ. This perspective shift has led to cascading insights across multiple fields. Dermatologists now recognize that different skin tones require different approaches to treating common conditions like acne, eczema, and psoriasis. The underlying inflammatory pathways, barrier function, and cellular responses vary subtly but significantly across the pigmentation spectrum. Dr. Carmen Sanchez, dermatology researcher at Yale, explains, "We're moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach to dermatology. The same condition can present differently and respond differently to treatment depending on skin pigmentation. This isn't just about appearance. It's about fundamentally different physiological processes. These differences extend to skin aging as well. While higher melanin content provides superior protection against photoaging, the premature aging caused by UV exposure, the mechanisms of chronological aging vary across skin types. Darker skin tends to maintain its structural integrity longer, with delayed appearance of fine lines but greater susceptibility to certain types of pigmentation changes. Beyond the skin itself, researchers have uncovered unexpected relationships between skin pigmentation and vitamin D that go far beyond bone health. Vitamin D receptors have been identified in tissues throughout the body, including the brain, heart, muscles, immune cells, and reproductive organs. This suggests that the evolutionary compromise between UV protection and vitamin D synthesis has implications for nearly every body system. Studies now link vitamin D status to mood disorders, cardiovascular health, autoimmune conditions, and even certain cancers, connections that help explain some perplexing patterns in disease distribution across different populations. For instance, populations with darker skin living at higher latitudes show higher rates of certain vitamin D-influenced conditions, including some autoimmune diseases and specific cancers. Conversely, lighter-skinned populations in sun-intensive environments experience higher rates of skin cancer and certain inflammatory disorders linked to excessive UV exposure. But perhaps most revolutionary is the emerging understanding of how skin pigmentation influences neurological function. In 2019, Researchers at the University of Edinburgh discovered that melanocytes share a developmental origin with nerve cells. Both derive from the same type of embryonic tissue called the neural crest. This developmental connection has profound implications. Melanin-producing cells don't just exist in the skin. They're found in the brain, inner ear, and even the heart. In these locations, they serve functions entirely unrelated to UV protection, including roles in hearing sensitivity, balance, and potentially even emotional processing. Professor Natalie Rhodes, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, explains, "The pigment-producing pathway has been conserved across millions of years of evolution because it serves multiple functions. We're finding that some of the same genes that influence skin color also affect neurological development and function. It's a remarkable example of how evolution repurposes successful biological mechanisms." This insight helps explain puzzling observations, such as why certain neurological and auditory conditions show different prevalence patterns across population groups with different skin pigmentation profiles. The connection isn't about skin color itself, but about the underlying genetic architecture that influences both pigmentation and neurological development. The turning point in our understanding comes with the realization that skin color is not merely a superficial adaptation to UV exposure, but part of an integrated biological system that influences health and function throughout the body. This perspective dissolves the artificial boundary between cosmetic and functional human variation, revealing that even seemingly superficial traits like pigmentation are deeply intertwined with fundamental physiological processes. As Dr. Patrick Nguyen of the University of California explains, we need to stop thinking of human variation as either meaningful or meaningless. The same genetic pathways that determine something visible like skin color often have pleiotropic effects, meaning they influence multiple seemingly unrelated traits. Evolution doesn't respect our conceptual categories. This understanding has profound implications not just for medicine and biology, but for how we conceptualize human diversity itself. The visible differences between human populations represent not arbitrary variations, but complex adaptations to diverse environments, adaptations that influence health, physiology, and function in ways we're only beginning to understand. The revolution in our understanding of skin pigmentation carries profound implications for medicine, public health, and even social policy. Most immediately, it demands a fundamental reconsideration of how we approach medical research and treatment. For decades, medical studies predominantly enrolled participants of European descent, creating a bias in our understanding of human physiology, disease processes, and treatment responses. As we now recognize the complex interplay between pigmentation genes and diverse biological functions, this research gap becomes increasingly problematic. We've been developing medications and treatments based on a narrow subset of human genetic variation, explains Dr. Caroline Stanford, pharmaceutical researcher at Johns Hopkins University. Then we're surprised when efficacy varies across different populations. It's not just about skin, it's about all the interconnected systems that co-evolved with pigmentation adaptations. This recognition has sparked initiatives like the All of Us research program, which aims to build one of the most diverse health databases in history by enrolling participants from across the demographic spectrum. Similarly, the International HapMap Project and the 1000 Genomes Project have worked to capture human genetic diversity more comprehensively, creating reference databases that better represent humanity's full genetic variation. The implications extend to everyday medical practice as well. Physicians increasingly recognize that many clinical signs and symptoms present differently across skin tones. Conditions like cyanosis, bluish discoloration indicating low oxygen, erythema, redness indicating inflammation, and jaundice, yellowing indicating liver issues, can be more difficult to detect visually in darker skin. Medical education is slowly adapting, with some institutions now including specific training on how to recognize these indicators across the full spectrum of human skin tones. In dermatology, the changes are even more dramatic. Condition descriptions, diagnostic criteria, and standard photographs in medical textbooks have historically featured predominantly lighter skin, making diagnosis more challenging on darker skin tones. New resources like the Skin of Color Society and specialized textbooks are working to address this gap, providing visual references and diagnostic guidance across the full range of human pigmentation. Beyond clinical medicine, our new understanding of skin pigmentation carries important public health implications. Current sun exposure recommendations, for instance, often fail to account for the significant variations in UV vulnerability across different skin tones. While everyone requires some sun protection, the optimal balance between protection and exposure varies considerably depending on baseline pigmentation, location, and season. Public health researcher Dr. Patricia Norton explains, "We need nuanced messaging about sun exposure. Someone with very dark skin in Seattle faces a completely different risk-benefit equation than someone with very light skin in Miami. One-size-fits-all guidelines serve no one well." Similarly, recommendations for vitamin D supplementation should ideally consider the interaction between skin tone, geography, diet, and lifestyle. Individuals with darker skin living at higher latitudes may require significantly more vitamin D supplementation than current general guidelines suggest, especially during winter months when UVB radiation, the type that catalyzes vitamin D production, is minimal. The implications extend beyond medicine and public health to considerations about the built environment and occupational safety. Lighting standards for workplaces and public spaces have typically been developed without consideration for how different skin tones perceive and respond to various lighting conditions. Research now shows that optimal lighting for visibility, reading performance, and eye comfort varies somewhat across the pigmentation spectrum. Even sunscreen technology, long developed with lighter skin as the implicit default, is evolving to better serve diverse skin types. Traditional mineral sunscreens, while effective, can leave a whitish cast that's particularly visible on darker skin. Newer formulations aim to provide equal protection while remaining cosmetically elegant across all skin tones, an innovation driven by greater recognition of diverse consumer needs. Perhaps most profoundly, our evolving understanding of skin pigmentation carries implications for how we conceptualize human variation itself. The scientific evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that skin color represents a complex adaptive trait shaped by multiple selection pressures, not a marker of deeper biological divisions. Anthropologist Dr. Charles Swift puts it bluntly, "The scientific reality of human skin color utterly demolishes traditional notions of race. What we see is not discrete categories but continuous variation shaped by remarkably similar genetic mechanisms across all populations. We're looking at different adaptive solutions to universal human challenges." This perspective is reinforced by genetic evidence showing that the genes for skin pigmentation represent some of the strongest examples of positive selection in the human genome, a pattern consistent with local adaptation rather than population division. Moreover, these adaptations occurred relatively recently in evolutionary time, well after the establishment of the fundamental genetic unity of our species. As Stanford geneticist Dr. Noah Phillips explains, "The remarkable thing about human skin color is that such visibly different phenotypes are produced by relatively minor genetic variations. We're talking about changes in a tiny fraction of our genome creating adaptations to local conditions, not evidence of separate evolutionary paths." This scientific reality creates opportunities for rethinking how we teach about human variation. Rather than presenting human diversity as an arbitrary or divisive phenomenon, skin pigmentation offers a compelling case study in how our species has adapted to diverse environments through elegant genetic solutions that optimize survival and reproduction across the remarkable range of conditions humans inhabit. In educational settings, the evolution of skin pigmentation provides a powerful example of how natural selection operates on human populations, a concrete, visible case of adaptation that helps make evolutionary theory tangible for students. By focusing on the functional aspects of pigmentation variation, the trade-offs, compromises, and local adaptations, educators can present human diversity as the fascinating biological story it truly is. But perhaps the most profound implication is how this scientific understanding might influence our social conception of human difference. By recognizing skin color as an adaptation, one of many that allowed our single species to thrive in environments from equatorial jungles to Arctic tundra, we gain a perspective that simultaneously honors human diversity while emphasizing our shared evolutionary heritage. As biological anthropologist Dr. Carrie Stevenson notes, "The science tells a clear story. Skin color is about adaptation, not division. It's a testament to our species' remarkable ability to thrive in diverse environments through biological and cultural adaptations." That's something we could celebrate rather than use as a basis for division. As the sun rises over Tanzania's Olduvai Gorge, one of the places where our ancient ancestors first walked upright on the African savanna, it illuminates a landscape that challenged early humans in countless ways. The same sunlight that made this environment habitable also presented one of humanity's first great adaptive challenges: how to protect the body's largest organ from radiation damage while still harnessing the sun's life-giving properties. The solution our species developed, variable pigmentation that optimizes the balance between protection and production based on local conditions, represents one of evolution's most elegant compromises. Like so many aspects of human biology, skin color embodies not perfection but trade-offs, a negotiation between competing biological needs that produce different optimal solutions in different environments. What makes this adaptation particularly remarkable is its visibility. Unlike our specialized brain wiring, efficient bipedal gait, or refined immune responses, skin pigmentation is immediately apparent to the naked eye. This visibility has led to centuries of misinterpretation, with superficial differences mistaken for fundamental divisions. Yet the scientific reality tells a different story. The same genetic mechanisms, operating on the same foundational human genome, produce the full spectrum of human skin tones. These adaptations emerged recently in our evolutionary history, mere moments in the grand chronicle of our species. And rather than reflecting separate evolutionary paths, they demonstrate our shared biological ingenuity, the capacity to adapt and thrive across dramatically different environments. Perhaps most profoundly, the science of skin color reveals the artificial nature of the boundaries we have constructed around human variation. The continuous gradient of pigmentation across human populations, with more variation within traditional racial categories than between them, defies attempts to place humans in discrete categories. Instead, it showcases the remarkable continuity of our species across geography and time. In the genes that influence our skin color, we find not division but connection, evidence of our shared ancestry and common humanity. The very trait that has so often been used to separate humanity is, ironically, one of the strongest testaments to our fundamental unity. As we come to understand the complex science behind human pigmentation, the interplay of genetics, environment, and culture that shapes our appearance, we gain not just scientific knowledge but an opportunity to see human diversity through the lens of adaptation rather than division, to recognize difference as the ingenious response of a single species to diverse challenges. In this light, the spectrum of human skin color becomes not a basis for separation but a living testament to our shared evolutionary journey, a visible reminder that beneath the surface, we are one remarkably adaptable species that used both biological and cultural innovations to thrive in environments from equator to Arctic, desert to rainforest. The science of skin color ultimately reveals that human diversity is not a problem to be overcome, but a solution our species discovered, nature's elegant answer to the challenge of becoming the most widely distributed large mammal on Earth.